Chapter 4. Time and Attention. Naturally, it is possible to make a rough estimate only of the amount of attention people give each day to informing themselves about public affairs. Yet it is interesting that three estimates that I have examined agree tolerably well, though they were made at different times, in different places, and by different methods. A questionnaire was sent by Hotchkiss and Franken to 1761 men and women college students in New York City, and answers came from all but a few. Scott used a questionnaire on 4,000 prominent business and professional men in Chicago and received replies from 2,300. Between 70 and 75% of all those who replied to either inquiry thought they spent a quarter of an hour a day reading newspapers. Only 4% of the Chicago group guessed at less than this and 25% guessed at more. Among the New Yorkers, a little over 8% figured their newspaper reading at less than 15 minutes, and 17.5% at more. Very few people have an accurate idea of 15 minutes, so the figures are not to be taken literally. Moreover, businessmen, professional people, and college students are most of them liable to a curious little bias against appearing to spend too much time over the newspapers, and perhaps also to a faint suspicion of a desire to be known as rapid readers. All that the figures can justly be taken to mean is that over 3/4 of those in the selected groups rate rather low the attention they give to printed news of the outer world. These time estimates are fairly well confirmed by a test which is less subjective. Scott asked his Chicagoans how many papers they read each day, and was told that the 2 and 3 paper readers are 67%, which comes fairly close to the 71% in Scott's group who rate themselves at 15 minutes a day. The omnivorous readers of from 4 to 8 papers coincide roughly with the 25% who rated themselves at more than 15 minutes. 2. It is still more difficult to guess how the time is distributed. The college students were asked to name the 5 features which interest you most. Just under 20% voted for general news, just under 15% for editorials, just under 12% for politics, a little over 8% for finance, not 2 years after the armistice a little over 6% for foreign news, 3.5% for local, nearly 3% for business, and 0.25% for news about labor. A scattering said they were most interested in sports, special articles, the theater, advertisements, cartoons, book reviews, accuracy, music, ethical tone, society, brevity, art, stories, shipping, school news, current news, print. Disregarding these, about 67.5% picked as the most interesting features news and opinion that dealt with public affairs. This was a mixed college group. The girls professed greater interest than the boys in general news, foreign news, local news, politics, editorials, the theater, music, art, stories, cartoons, advertisements, and ethical tone. The boys, on the other hand, were more absorbed in finance, sports, business page, accuracy, and brevity. These discriminations correspond a little too closely with the ideals of what is cultured and moral, manly and decisive, not to make one suspect the utter objectivity of the replies. Yet they agree fairly well with the replies of Scott's Chicago business and professional men. They were asked, not what features interested them most, but why they preferred one newspaper to another. Nearly 71% based their conscious preference on local news, 17.8%, or political, 15.8%, or financial, 11.3%, or foreign, 9.5%, or general, 7.2%, or editorials, 9%. The other 30% decided on grounds not connected with public affairs. They ranged from not quite 7% who decided for ethical tone, down to 1/20% who cared most about humor. How do these preferences correspond with the space given by newspapers to various subjects? Unfortunately, there are no data collected on this point for the newspapers read by the Chicago and New York groups at the time the questionnaires were made. But there is an interesting analysis made over 20 years ago by Wilcox. He studied 110 newspapers in 14 large cities, and classified the subject matter of over 9,000 columns. Averaged for the whole country, the various newspaper matter was found to fill. In order to bring this table into a fair comparison, it is necessary to exclude the space given to advertisements, and recompute the percentages. For the advertisements occupied only an infinitesimal part of the conscious preference of the Chicago group or the college group. I think this is justifiable for our purposes because the press prints what advertisements it can get, whereas the rest of the paper is designed to the taste of its readers. The table would then read. In this revised table, if you add up the items which may be supposed to deal with public affairs, that is to say war, foreign, political, miscellaneous, business news, and opinion, you find a total of 76.5% of the edited space devoted in 1900 to the 70.6% of reasons given by Chicago businessmen in 1916 for preferring a particular newspaper, and to the 5 features which most interested 67.5% of the New York college students in 1920. This would seem to show that the tastes of businessmen and college students in big cities today still correspond more or less to the average judgments of newspaper editors in big cities 20 years ago. Since that time, the proportion of features to news has undoubtedly increased, and so has the circulation and the size of newspapers. Therefore, if today you could secure accurate replies from more typical groups than college students or business and professional men, you would expect to find a smaller percentage of time devoted to public affairs, as well as a smaller percentage of space. On the other hand, you would expect to find that the average man spends more than a quarter of an hour on his newspaper, and that while the percentage of space given to public affairs is less than 20 years ago, the net amount is greater. No elaborate deductions are to be drawn from these figures. They help merely to make somewhat more concrete our notions of the effort that goes day by day into acquiring the data of our opinions. The newspapers are, of course, not the only means, but they are certainly the principal ones. Magazines, the public forum, the Chautauqua, the church, political gatherings, trade union meetings, women's clubs, and news serials and the moving picture houses supplement the press. But taking it all at the most favorable estimate, the time each day is small when any of us is directly exposed to information from our unseen environment.